So programming and computer science ultimately is really about making machines that are intelligent, and people have been trying to make machines write programs that have intelligent behaviour since the very first programs were created back in the 1950s, on the first days of us having computers to do this, and even before that people were thinking about how to do it. But the question then is, how do you decide when you've got an intelligent computer? If you met a computer, how would you know it was intelligent? So the first person to think about how you would tell whether a computer was intelligent or not was Alan Turing. And he actually came up with an idea of a test that was actually based on a Victorian parlour game. So the idea of the Victorian parlour game was whether you could tell the difference between a man and a woman. So the Victorians didn't have PlayStations, they didn't have Wiis, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have a lot to do, so they had to make up their own entertainments. One of the things they did was play lots of party games. One of those party games, Alan Turing kind of thought about, it was called the Imitation Game, and he realised that you could actually adapt this party game as a test for intelligence. So what was the party game? Well, essentially what happened was a man and a woman would go out of the room, and everybody else would then have to write questions on slips of paper that would be passed out of the room, and the man and the woman would write their answers to the questions, and those would be passed back. And what you had to tell was which was the man and which was the woman just from their answers. So you didn't know which slips were coming from which, and there was a twist. The man was allowed to lie, whereas the woman had to tell the truth. Alan Turing realised that you could turn that into a test for intelligence. So rather than having a man and a woman out of the room, he realised that what you could do is essentially the same thing, but have a human and a computer out of the room that you ask questions of in the same kind of way. So nowadays we could email or text them questions, and they could email or text their answers back. We would have to try and then work out from their answers which one was the human and which was the computer. What Alan Turing suggested was, if we can't tell the difference, we can't tell which is the human and which is the computer, we would have to accept that the computer was just as intelligent as the human, and it's arguably the best test we've got for whether a machine is intelligent or not. And in fact, there is actually a prize called the Lerner Prize, and this is a competition that's run every year for computers to see if they can pass the Turing test, to see if they can convince people that they are a human, and if they ever do, then they'll win this big prize. Okay, so if I'm going to show you how a Turing test works and give you a better idea of what it's about, I'm going to need 3 volunteers. So I could have 3 volunteers coming out. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is actually act out a real Turing test. So this was a real conversation between a computer and a human. So one of you is going to be the computer, and one of you is going to play the part of the human, but nobody, not even you, is going to know which. So we're just going to label you as A. You are person A, which may be the person, maybe the computer, and you're going to be person B, which may be the human or maybe the computer. And you each get a script, so you read out your particular part. So you're A, you just read out the parts of person A, and you're B, so you read out the parts of person B. And you have all got to then try and work out which of these is the human and which is the computer just from what they're saying, okay? And we also need somebody to look after the truth. So here is the truth in the envelope. Can we trust you to look after the truth? Thank you. Okay, so I'll do the narration. You just read the part, and you've got to try and work out which is the human and which is the computer. So we've got A and B, they're talking, each holds a PlayStation 3 controller in their hand, because this was a conversation a few years ago, and actor B starts.
Do you like video games?
I don't like video games. I love video games.
Great, we have something in common.
We do then, isn't that nice?
What video games do you play the most?
Mostly Animal Crossing and Kirby Air Ride right now.
I just got Super Smash Bros. Melee recently.
Good.
Yeah, it's destroying any social life I had. Great stuff.
Okay, let's pause there. So this is halfway through the conversation, and now you can have a go at deciding. Hands up if you think A is the computer, and hands up if you think B is the computer. Okay, so at the moment we're probably going for B is the computer. Of course, the computer passes the test if everybody picks it as being the human. If you're not sure, even if you were 50-50 split, then the computer would have passed the test. You'd have to accept it was indistinguishable from a human, so as intelligent as a human by the test. Okay, but we'll carry on. It looked like you were going mainly for B there. Let's go to the next scene. You may want to change your mind as you hear more. You may decide, yes, you're sure that's the right way around. So A and B are talking again. So it's the same computer with the same human, but this time they're talking about what to talk about. And this time A starts.
What topic of conversation do you choose?
A cool one.
How cool?
Very cool.
Very, very cool.
Very, very, very cool.
Very, very, very cool.
Very, 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 very cool.
Very what?
Cool.
Very,
Very cool.
very cool times infinity.
Very cool times infinity plus 1.
So hands up if you now think that A is the computer. And hands up if you think B is the computer. So we're probably going more 50-50 there, but we've been a swing away from B. But if it is 50-50, then that's no better than chance, and so you'd have to accept that the computer has passed. You couldn't tell it apart from the human from the conversation. So at this point, we better find out the truth. So this is where we come over to you. You have the truth. If I brought some drums, we would do a drum roll now, but maybe you can all provide me with a drum roll. Oh, you can. Great. Okay, a drum roll. And stop. And the truth is?
The computer is A.
So A was the computer. So those of you who got that right, give yourself a pat on the back. Those of you who didn't, never mind. And of course, if we carried on the conversation, actually eventually it would become more and more obvious which was the computer. It actually, with more conversation, it started to say things that were not so clear. So what kind of things was it doing that gave it away? There's all sorts of things that can kind of give it away. So what topic of conversation do you choose? That's actually not a very natural way to say that. Maybe you would say it in a more natural way. But of course, once we know what's giving it away, we can kind of go back and change the program and make sure it says something more natural in that situation. So that's basically how the Turing test works. And as we saw, it can be quite difficult. You can write programs that can imitate humans, but that leaves the question, is it actually an intelligent computer, even if it's passed the Turing test? And not everybody agrees it would be. So the people who are writing programs to win the Learner Prize to actually pass the Turing test aren't necessarily writing programs that they're trying to make intelligent. They're trying to write programs that can fool people into thinking that they're a human, which isn't necessarily the same thing. And if you go back to the Victorian parley game, just because the man convinced everybody he was a woman doesn't actually mean that he is a woman. It just means he's very good at impersonating a woman. And so the same may be true if we ever do have a computer pass the Turing test. So far, no computer has passed the test, but the chances are one day it will happen. But if it does, what we may find is that then people are saying, well, that isn't really what intelligence is about, and people are already saying that, and we'll be looking for a better way of telling whether a computer is intelligent or as intelligent as a human or not. So that's basically what the Turing test is all about. Thank you.